In a quiet, dusty town near Kumasi, Ghana, lived a soft-spoken village girl named Abena. She was kind, gentle, and full of dreams. Life was simple, until she met Kojo, a charming young man with a big smile and even bigger dreams. Kojo wanted to be a politician one day, and he talked about changing the world. Abena believed in him. She believed in his words, his promises, and in the love they shared. As time passed, Abena became pregnant. When she told Kojo, he held her hand, looked into her eyes, and promised marriage. He said everything would be fine, that they would build a future together. But one morning, she woke up and found his side of the bed empty. Kojo was gone. All he left behind was a short note on the table that read, "This child will ruin my future." Abena read it over and over, her hands shaking, her heart breaking. The love she trusted had vanished like smoke, leaving her alone, confused, and pregnant. Whispers started in the village. People stared. But no one knew the pain she carried inside. She had no answers, just silence and tears. Her whole world fell apart in one night, and all she had left was her unborn baby, and a note that shattered her heart. What she didn't know was, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything. Abena thought the worst was over. After Kojo left her with only a note and a broken heart, she had stayed strong through her pregnancy. She delivered her baby girl in a small hospital near Kumasi. When she first held her daughter, her pain faded for a moment. She smiled again. The baby, soft and warm in her arms, gave her a reason to breathe. She named her Urama, meaning God's gift, and whispered promises into her tiny ears. Even without Kojo, Abena believed she could raise her child with love. But fate had one more cruel twist waiting. One rainy afternoon, just days after giving birth, a young nurse came into her room. The nurse looked scared. She sat on the edge of the bed and leaned in close. Her voice shook. "Please, don't tell anyone I told you," she whispered. "But, your baby is not here anymore. Kojo paid someone, he bribed a hospital worker. Your baby was taken, sold, to a foreign charity. They've already left the country." Abena froze. Her world stopped. The walls around her spun. She reached for her belly, but it was flat. She reached for the crib, but it was empty. Her mind couldn't understand the words. Her baby. Gone. Sold like an item in a market. Her arms felt like stone. Her lips trembled. Then she screamed, a scream so loud it made people outside rush into the room. But there was nothing they could do. No one could bring back her daughter. Urama was gone. Abena fell to the ground, holding her stomach and crying out for her child. She begged the nurses, she begged God, she even begged the walls to tell her it wasn't true. But deep down, she knew it was. The pain was like fire in her chest. Her heart shattered. Her womb was empty, and so was her life. Meanwhile, far away in Accra, Kojo was living like a king. He had just married the daughter of a powerful government minister. Their wedding was in the news, a grand event with expensive clothes, important guests, and smiling photos. Kojo shook hands with political leaders, made speeches about hope and change, and walked like a man who owned the future. People clapped for him. No one knew what he had done. No one knew he had stolen his own child's life to buy power. Back in the village, people started saying Abena had gone mad. She stopped talking. She walked around with empty eyes. Every morning, she sat outside the hospital waiting for a baby who would never come. Every night, she sang lullabies to the wind. Some villagers pitied her. Others whispered behind her back. But inside her, something was changing. Her silence was not weakness. It was a storm waiting to rise. Kojo thought he had erased her. He thought she would stay broken. But he was wrong. He didn't just leave behind a woman. He had created a warrior. Abena vanished. One day she was there, sitting under the tree outside the hospital, quiet and broken. The next day, gone. People in the village whispered, "She's lost her mind." Some said she wandered into the forest. Others said she died from heartbreak. But no one really knew. They just stopped asking. Time moved on, but her name stayed like a ghost in the wind, sad, soft, forgotten. But Abena wasn't lost. She had left everything behind, her name, her village, her pain, and crossed borders. She traveled all the way to Namibia, far from anyone who knew her story. There, she joined a small child protection NGO. She worked quietly, helping mothers and lost children. She watched others cry, comforted them, and learned how to fight for those without voices. Slowly, she started to heal. She changed her name, cut her hair, and built a new identity. No one called her Abena anymore. She was now Amakusi, a calm but fierce woman with sharp eyes and a fire in her voice. Years passed. Her soul stitched itself back together, piece by piece. She still carried the pain, but it no longer crushed her. Instead, it powered her. She read laws. She studied child trafficking. She helped rescue children who had been taken, just like her daughter. Every time she saved a child, she felt a little closer to the one she had lost. Then one day, everything changed. She received an email from an international child database she had quietly registered with years ago, giving her DNA for a match, just in case. Her hands shook as she read the message. A match had been found. A little girl, around 6 years old, had entered an orphanage in Sierra Leone. No name, no history, just sad drawings and silence. But her DNA matched Ama's. It was her. It was Urama. Abena dropped the phone. Her chest tightened. Tears filled her eyes. Her baby was alive. Not a dream. Not a hope. Real. Breathing. Somewhere out there. The little girl she had cried for, screamed for, prayed for, was waiting. She packed her bags without hesitation. She flew to Sierra Leone the next day. Her heart raced the whole way. What if her daughter didn't remember her? What if she had been hurt, forgotten, changed forever? At the orphanage, she stood frozen at the doorway. Then she saw her, a small girl sitting alone, drawing with crayons. The paper was filled with pictures of angels, all with sad eyes. Abena stepped forward, knees weak, hands trembling. The girl looked up. For a moment, nothing. Then the child tilted her head and whispered, "Mama." Abena dropped to her knees, sobbing, reaching out, arms wide open. The two held each other, hearts beating as one. Time stopped. Her daughter was alive. And this time, no one would take her away. The world thought Abena had disappeared. But she had been reborn, and now, her story was only just beginning. Abena didn't waste a single day. As soon as she saw her daughter in that orphanage, she began the process to adopt her, legally, fully, and with her whole heart. It wasn't easy. There were forms, interviews, and checks. But Abena didn't stop. She had come too far. Nothing would take her child away again. After weeks of waiting, crying, and hoping, the final papers were signed. Urama was hers again, not just in blood, but in law, in spirit, and in life. The little girl, now 6 years old, was quiet but bright. She drew all the time. Her drawings were full of angels with wings and glowing eyes. But the eyes were always sad, like they had seen too much. Abena would watch her draw and wonder what her daughter had gone through, what memories lived behind those silent stares. But she never pushed. She just held her close every night and whispered, "You're safe now. I'm here." They moved to Abuja, Nigeria, to start fresh. A new city, a new beginning. Abena used everything she had learned in Namibia, all the training, the pain, the wisdom, and started a foundation for children who had been trafficked or taken from their families. She named it Urama's Light. At first, it was small. Just a few staff, a tiny office, and big dreams. But Abena had fire in her now. She spoke to people, to leaders, to judges. She told her story, not to be pitied, but to make them listen. Soon, people started paying attention. Her name began to travel in justice circles. Her face was on panels, her words quoted in newspapers. She didn't care about fame, she cared about impact. She worked with police. She trained social workers. She fought for new laws. She stood before lawmakers and said, I am the voice of the mothers who never got to hold their babies. I am the voice of the child who sleeps in fear. And they listened. She pushed for stricter punishments against traffickers. She demanded better protection for children. She wrote proposals, led campaigns, held candlelight events for missing children. Slowly, things began to change. One law passed. Then another. Shelters were opened. New systems were built. And at the heart of it all was Abena, the quiet village girl who had once lost everything. At home, Urama laughed more. She started painting angels with bright eyes now, not just sad ones. She danced around the kitchen and asked endless questions. She called her mother, my hero. And every night, before bed, Abena kissed her forehead and said, You saved me too. Abena had once been a shadow, forgotten by the world. Now she was a storm, bold, fierce, unstoppable. The world had taken her child and tried to break her spirit. But now, she was writing new stories. Not with anger. But with purpose. Not with revenge. But with power. And this time, she was the one in control. Years had passed, and the once confident Kojo was no longer the man he used to be. His polished shoes didn't shine as bright, and the crowds that once cheered his name had long disappeared. His marriage to the minister's daughter had ended in scandal, and his political career had fallen apart. Rumors of fraud and betrayal followed him everywhere. Doors that used to open easily for him now stayed shut. Still, Kojo wasn't ready to give up. He believed he just needed a fresh start, a clean image. Something the public could believe in again. His team suggested something clever. Work with children, they said. Support a charity. Make the people think you've changed. Kojo nodded. It was the perfect plan. He searched for the most respected child welfare organization in the region and found it, Urama's Light. It was powerful, loved by the people, and run by someone known for real impact. Kojo didn't know who ran it, and honestly, he didn't care. He just wanted to be seen shaking the right hands. After some calls and emails, a meeting was arranged. Kojo put on his best suit, practiced his smile, and stepped into the foundation's main office in Abuja. He was ready to charm his way back to the top. But the moment he entered the boardroom, his steps stopped. There, sitting at the head of the table, was a woman he hadn't seen in over a decade. Her face was older, stronger, more powerful, but still hauntingly familiar. His throat went dry. His heart skipped. It was Abena. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, calm and steady, and said, Please, take a seat. Kojo's hands trembled slightly as he sat. Around the room, the board members watched quietly. They could feel something heavy in the air, though they didn't yet know the whole story. Next to Abena sat a girl, maybe 10 years old, with curious eyes and a drawing pad in her lap. She glanced at Kojo, then leaned in close to her mother and whispered, Mommy, why is that man shaking? Abena gave a soft smile. Because some demons get nervous around angels, she replied. Kojo's heart sank. That little girl. She was his. The daughter he had once sold to protect his future. The child he never expected to see again. She was alive. Right there. And she didn't even know who he was. He tried to speak about his plans, his new vision for helping children. But the room was cold. No one believed him. The board listened politely, then voted. It was fast. Unanimous. Urama's light would never support Kojo or be connected to him in any way. As he left the building, cameras were waiting. The story had already started to spread. Kojo walked into the room thinking he could rebuild his name. But he had walked into a reckoning. Abena didn't scream. She didn't curse. She didn't need to. She was the chairwoman now, of the very foundation built from the ashes of her pain. And Kojo? He had become just another man begging at the feet of the woman he once betrayed. Kojo sat stiffly in the boardroom chair, trying to control his shaking hands. The confident smile he wore when he first walked in had disappeared. Sweat began to gather on his forehead. His mouth was dry, and his words came out slower now, less smooth than before. He tried to explain how much he cared about helping children, how his new political campaign was all about hope and healing. But the room was quiet. The board members listened, but no one nodded. No one smiled. Kojo could feel the silence pressing on him like a heavy blanket. He glanced once again at the little girl sitting beside the woman at the head of the table, the same woman who had just introduced herself as the chairwoman of Urama's Light. Abena. The same Abena he had left all those years ago. She looked different now. Stronger. Fiercer. Like someone who had walked through fire and come out brighter. Her presence was calm, but powerful. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse him. But her eyes? Her eyes held everything, the past, the truth, the pain, and the power. The little girl beside her looked up at Kojo curiously. Her eyes were innocent but observant, as if she could feel the strange energy in the room. She leaned close to her mother and asked softly, "Mommy, why is that man shaking?" Abena didn't look away from Kojo. She simply smiled and replied, "Because some demons get nervous around angels." The room stayed silent. But the words hit like thunder. Kojo blinked fast, trying to stay calm. He didn't fully understand what had just happened, but a part of him did. That little girl. Her face. Her voice. Something inside him began to connect the pieces. Could it be? No. It couldn't. But the truth was already sitting in front of him, drawn across the child's kind face and in the woman's quiet strength. The same child he had sold, was right there. Abena didn't say more. She didn't need to. The meeting moved forward. The board began to vote. Each person gave a simple no, one after another. A unanimous decision. The foundation would not support Kojo's campaign. Not now. Not ever. In fact, they agreed to blacklist him permanently from all partnerships and grants. His name would never again be linked to children's welfare. Not after what he had done. Kojo stood up slowly. His knees were weak, his pride gone. Cameras were already waiting outside. Someone had tipped off the press. They were ready, microphones in hand, headlines forming in their minds. Fallen politician rejected by woman he betrayed. Kojo faces his past. The drama was too rich to ignore. As he stepped out into the light, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted his name. But all he could hear was that little voice again, "Why is that man shaking?" And Abena's soft reply echoing in his mind like a bell. "Because some demons get nervous around angels." That one line would follow him forever. Months later, in a beautiful hall filled with lights and soft music, Abena stood at a private gala hosted for leaders and changemakers across Africa. People from all over had gathered to celebrate the progress made in protecting children, and Abena was the guest of honor. She wore a simple, elegant dress, her daughter by her side, smiling proudly. The little girl had grown even stronger. She now spoke at schools and helped draw stories for the Foundation's books. That night, all eyes were on Abena as she walked up to the stage. She took a breath and looked out at the crowd. Her voice was gentle but clear. "There was a time," she began, "when I thought my life had ended. A time when I was left alone, heartbroken, and empty. A man I trusted left me. He sold my baby. Not for money, but for something worse, for power. For status." The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Her eyes didn't water, but her words carried the weight of every tear she had once cried. "But today, my daughter is free. She owns her own name. And I own my silence. I could have screamed. I could have fought back with rage. But instead, I built something. I chose purpose. And let that be his curse." The crowd stood and applauded. People wiped their eyes. Cameras clicked. In the shadows, at the back of the hall, Kojo stood hidden. He couldn't breathe. His hands trembled as he covered his face. He wept quietly, knowing the world had finally heard the truth, and that nothing he did could ever undo it.